his name.
I wasn't particularly intending to do another video today, maybe more than one tomorrow or something, but the Yellowhammer documents dropped, as they were ordered to by Parliament, and they make interesting and chilling reading. But there's a couple of things I think need to be discussed first before I sort of go in and summarise what it says. Firstly, something has been redacted. Probably something to do with security concerns and so on. That would have to be the reason why that would be redacted. So fair enough, but I hope that members of Parliament get to see the unredacted version. The other thing to note is that the kind of fix, the whitewash, the excuse for people to ignore this is already in. The document that was leaked a while ago was titled, this is the baseline assumption, this is how bad we can expect things to be with a reasonable degree of certainty, though they might be worse, they might be slightly better. Now it's titled worst case planning assumptions. So the excuse will be, oh, this is the worst case scenario, things are going to be better than that, this is, just in case or whatever. That's going to be the spin, right? Bullshit. This is the standard baseline assumption of how bad things are going to be, and they could be a lot worse, and it's pretty bad. So when we leave the EU, if we leave the EU in a no-deal situation in October, all our arrangements with the EU abruptly end and cut off. We become third country status to the rest of the EU, and there's likely to be a lot of bad blood between the UK and the EU, so member states within the EU are unlikely to treat us nicely moving forward, and any trade arrangements that we make with the EU have to be made with the EU as a whole, of course. That's the way it works, that's the way a trading bloc works. So yeah, we're not going to be in a good position, we're unlikely to get any quick deals from any EU countries. Basically we're in shit right from the get-go. The only bilateral deal that we have with another country is with Ireland around social security arrangements and things, because there's so much crossover between the two, particularly with reference to Northern Ireland. But that's it. That is it. Nothing else. Now they say they're going to guarantee EU citizens all the rights that they currently enjoy if they've come to the UK prior to the cut-off date. I don't believe that, given the trouble that EU citizens are already having applying for the settled status and so on. No. And the things that Priti Patel said, such a bad name, Priti Patel said about the income requirements and all the rest. No, clearly you're not going to retain all the rights that you had as an EU citizen in the UK, and that means UK citizens living abroad in the EU are unlikely to receive sympathetic treatment from those governments in a kind of reciprocal shitfest. So that's not good. It says that public, that is governmental, and business readiness for no deal is at a low level, isn't likely to get particularly better, because there's no clear decision on what form the EU exit is going to take. So people are hopes, this is the problem since the start. Leave was never defined. Was it going to be a soft Brexit, a hard Brexit, a no-deal Brexit, a middling Brexit? Were we still going to be part of the customs union? Were we still going to be part of this, part of that? Would there still be freedom of movement? And all forms of Brexit, from the softest of the soft to the hardest of the hard, all fell under that same catch-all. But now we're at the worst possible version of that, which does not have that level of support. But that also means that a lot of people aren't prepared, or can't prepare, because it's not defined what they should be prepared for, and a lot of people are still hoping we can stop this stupidity before it actually takes place. But it means there's nothing definitive for people to prepare for. And people are tired of doing it, and it has been going on, and the costs have been mounting up, and that inevitably gets passed on, either in taxation or passed on to the consumer. So that's unlikely to get better, is the gist of that. Businesses are not ready to the same degree, so disruption can be worse in some sectors or with some businesses and better with other sectors and other businesses. Some businesses depend much more on their links with Europe, so just-in-time shipping, manufacturing, those kind of things. Others don't depend on it so much. Bigger companies are more agile in a way. You would think small companies would be more agile, but the bigger companies have the infrastructure to absorb some of the damage and the money to invest in contingency planning and so on, that smaller companies that you would think would be more agile don't. So small and medium-sized businesses are likely to be hit worst, and that's a good chunk of the economy. Service sector in particular is likely to be hit as well. So yeah, plus we're heading into the autumn and winter, so seasonal issues could have an aggravating effect. They go on to say later on things like if we have an outbreak of the flu, if we have winter flooding, any of these issues, it's going to make things even worse, and those are going to be much harder to deal with due to the Brexit situation. So yeah, they also undertake to act lawfully and in accordance with the rule of law. Again, I roll to disbelieve, given who's in power now, though this was put out on August 2nd, so a while back now. So here's the assumptions, and remember these are the baseline assumptions, not the worst case assumptions. For the purpose of freight flow and traffic management, as 31st October is a Thursday, day one of exit is now on a Friday rather than the weekend, and this is not to our advantage. It may also coincide with half-term school holidays, which vary across the UK. So that could mean more traffic problems, more issues if the shipping, if the trucks and everything get backed up. You're also going to have the half-term traffic in some areas, and going into the weekend is worse than other options. They do say that some countries might act in ways that would benefit us if they benefit as well. This again is particularly really just Ireland and perhaps France, so they might move to mitigate some of the damage, but judging from the noises coming out of the French Republic, I'm not too sure on that. And Ireland seems pretty pissed at us as well, so I don't think we can particularly count on anyone's cooperation, and they can hang together while we hang separately. So that's the issue. France is saying that they will impose EU mandatory controls on all UK goods starting straight away as soon as we're out of the EU. And that means 50 to 85% of heavy goods vehicles that we send over the channel will not be ready for French customs controls, which means they're going to be held up or turned back. And that will basically reduce the flow of goods by 40 to 60%, they're saying, of current levels. And that disruption will last perhaps up to 3 months before it recovers by about half. So yeah, it's unlikely to get back to current levels for much longer. So there's going to be an artificial restriction on the flow of goods. What does that mean? It means price rises, it means shortages. We probably won't starve. Positive message. But there will be less choice, there will be less options, there will be shortages, you might not get what you want. Basically, I mean, first world problems, right? But for people at the margins, it's a lot more serious. So yeah, that's a big problem, and it also slows down sort of repeat trips and picking up of goods and bringing them back, because again, there's an issue there. So yeah, you may remember this when the government failed to organise a truck traffic jam in order to show that we were ready a while back. So UK citizens travelling to and from the EU will be subjected to increased immigration checks. So that slows you down if you're going on holiday. There will be costs for visas and so on. But there won't have necessarily been a process set up for you to get that beforehand. So that's going to mean chaos again, where things have been freely flowing beforehand. So that's not good. That also means businessmen, salespeople, people like that aren't going to be able to travel so quickly or easily or cheaply going into the future, which all has a knock-on effect. Good news, the demand for energy will be met and there should be no disruption to electricity or gas supplies. In Northern Ireland, there will not be immediate disruption to electricity, which suggests that there could be later on. What they do say is there are likely to be significant electricity price increases for consumers, both business and domestic, and that will have plenty of knock-on effects for all of us. Again, inflationary pressure, prices going up, and running your house is going to be more expensive, and yet again, for people at the lower end, there's not really the room to cope with that. It's going to hit those people the hardest. The big issue, I think for a lot of us, is that the medical supply chain really relies on the free flow of goods and the just-in-time shipping and so on, and a lot of these things don't have a particularly long shelf life, and if trucks are left waiting, they may lose refrigeration, and so drugs and food and other things can spoil, which isn't good. And medical supplies are also extremely highly regulated anyway, so the knock-on effect is much bigger. There is a site where you can check what drugs are likely to be disrupted. Some of the medication that I take is going to be disrupted, so I've been trying to hold some back to have my own little stockpile just in case. But yeah, you should check into that. It's not going to be good at all. Delays could go on for up to 6 months, and this is likely to mean deaths. Right? Not a huge amount, not like bodies piling up in the street, but people are going to die because of medical shortages. Is it worth it? Veterinary medicine will also be disrupted, and so that can cause all kinds of problems for our agricultural community. So you have to consider that, and we can't use air freight capacity to mitigate any of this. We just don't have enough potential room in the flights to make up for it, or to make up for the shortage in supplies of medicine and so on. Fresh food supply will decrease. Again, probably nobody's going to starve, but there will be much less fresh food. Christmas might be a bit Spartan this year, and there are going to be shortages. So the other big problem of this is that our growing season will have come to an end by the time this kicks in, so it's not like we can compensate with our own. So prices are likely to rise. Again, all of this inflationary pressure, fuel, food, all the kind of basic necessities of life are going to be disrupted, and medication's going to be disrupted. Who's this going to hit hardest? The poorest. Water's unlikely to be affected, so that's good news. We'll be able to drown ourselves. Some financial services will be disrupted. Now, services as a whole are going to be really fucked up by all of this, and given how much of the UK economy is services as compared to, say, I don't know, fishing, it's a big issue. So some of that financial services will be disrupted, but services as a whole are likely to end up hobbled, if not crippled, by Brexit anyway. UK nationals are obviously going to lose their EU citizenship and are likely to lose their rights wherever they happen to live in the EU over time. Some countries have been nice enough to promise us fair treatment, others not so much, and if we're not treating them fairly, which we're not going to, then it's bound to be reciprocated. Security will be put at risk because law enforcement will not, and intelligence services will not be as freely sharing information because we're not part of the same block anymore. Pensioners and so on may have problems. If you've retired abroad, you might have problems accessing healthcare wherever you are. You might have to pay through the nose for private healthcare, whereas currently you're guaranteed access to the national healthcare services wherever in Europe, and so on. Yeah, it's likely to be complicated. I know some people in France are already wrestling with France's bureaucracy as to what their standing will be, and again, nobody quite knows for sure. Anyways, there's not a lot that you can really do. Plus, I think pensioners will also have to keep in mind that the pound is likely to plummet in value even more in the case of any Brexit, and a no-deal Brexit in particular. Another 25%, I think. Some people were bandying around, and it's likely to knock at least 5%, possibly as much as 12 or 15% off the UK economy over the next decade or so. So those pensions aren't going to be worth as much. So we're likely to see an influx of pensioners returning from the continent, I think. So that'll be interesting in terms of strain and so on public services that people like to go on about. Gibraltar is going to have major issues due to the constant cross-bordering and so on. It's going to be hours and hours wasted. And it's going to be worse there than most other places, but they've got their own contingencies in place. They predict, shockingly, that protests and counter-protests will take place across the UK, whichever way this goes, but particularly in the case of a no-deal impact, and is likely to eat up a lot of police resources and money. And there might be a rise in public disorder and community tensions. That's putting it mildly, based on what we've already seen. Regional traffic disruption caused by border delays will affect fuel distribution, so there might be a run on petrol, there might be shortages there, and again, prices are likely to go up. Then we're into the redacted section, which I'm assuming is something to do with intelligence or military or terrorism or something. I mean, they talk about tensions, but the IRA, or the continuity IRA or provisional IRA, whichever one it is, they're already planting bombs again. What Project Fear, did you say? I mean, I'm not inclined to give in to terrorists or whatever anyone might say, but this was just all so obvious and predictable, and it took so long and so much effort to get some kind of peace in Northern Ireland. To throw it away for no reason is just mind-blowingly stupid. Insurance payments might be delayed. Right, yeah, they note that low-income groups are going to be disproportionately affected by any price rises in food and fuel, right? You only need so much food. You only need so much fuel. So if you're relatively wealthy, you can take that hit, fine. If you're at the lower end of the scale, yeah, the smallest price rise when it comes to food or fuel is a big issue, and the only reason we haven't seen massive rises already due to the devaluing of the pound in terms of cost of living, food and so on is because the supermarkets have also been engaged in a price war at the same time. Once that comes to an end, or the dam breaks because the pound has lost so much value, yeah, food banks are already stretched. Not going to be a fun time for anyone. Let me see. Oops, hit the mic. Sort of recapping which areas are going to be hit. Likely to be fishing conflicts as we try to reassert control over our waters or whatever. Look, fishing is less than 1% of the UK economy. I don't know why it has been such an iconic thing. I feel bad for fishing communities and that have had a hard time and so on, but you've got to take into account the country as a whole, right? Your issue is parochial, and it's not particularly going to be benefited by Brexit in any case. Plus, we're going to have increased problems with border violations, people smuggling, illegal migration, all kinds of shit happening as a result of all this. That's just more of the same. But yeah, so in summary, it's shit. This is not a worst case scenario, which is what they're trying to present it as now. This is the baseline assumptions upon which the government is operating. Decreased security, street violence, not enough policing, price rises in electricity, fuel, food. Who's going to get hit the hardest? The poorest people. The very people who voted for Brexit for some reason. And what do we gain from all this? Absolutely fucking nothing. There is nothing. Every lie has fallen away. There are no gains to be had from a Brexit. Nothing whatsoever. It's farts. Right? Not even unicorn farts. Right? It's just hot air. Unpleasant, stinking hot air. We gain absolutely nothing from doing this to ourselves. It's utterly, utterly retarded.